Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the recruiting visits that have been going on and how I think there are going to be a ton of commitments here in the next week or so where we're going to have some big time names come off the board and the rankings kind of solidify just a little bit more in the recruiting world. But let's jump into college football 25. They released some rankings and some ratings, and I got a problem with pretty much all of them. So I want to break down all of this stuff. I do want to jump in here pretty quickly because got to get through three lists. We're only going to do the top 10s of these lists. I know they did top 25s, but we're going to do the top 10s of these lists just to make it a little bit easier on myself to get through all of the stuff that we need to get through. But let's jump on in. And first, we're going to start with the toughest places to play list that they dropped. And I have minor problems here. This is not by far. This is not my biggest problem that I'll have in this segment. I can promise you that. But first of all, let's start up at the top. A&M is a fantastic atmosphere, and I absolutely would have it in top five. It's not number one in my mind. LSU is comfortably number one in my mind. I don't think there's really any other argument, to be totally honest with you. I understand that Penn State is incredible. I understand A&M's incredible. I understand a lot of incredible atmospheres out there, but LSU's different. And I think that should be number one. Number two, Bama's not that great of an atmosphere. That sounds crazy to say, and I understand that. They are dominant in that building, and they have just done incredible things when they are at home. The reality is, it's because of the team you're playing. It's not because of the atmosphere around that stadium. It's not because of the fans. It's not because of the craziness in that stadium. It's because the team is just that much better than you. So it's no disrespect to that atmosphere. It's still one of the top 25 atmospheres in the country, but in my mind, it's not top 10, and it's definitely not number two. So that was the biggest problem I had with this. Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma, good atmospheres. I like Wisconsin a lot. Ohio State feels like one of those that it's a good one, but at the end of the day, not elite. Kind of feels like on the same level as like a Texas, where it should be a lot better than it is, it feels like. But at the end of the day, they have them at number four for some reason. I think Georgia might be a touch high here, to be totally honest with you. Sanford is an incredible stadium, and I've been in it a number of times, but I don't think it's a top five atmosphere if you were to ask me. I think Auburn and Tennessee being left off here is just insane. Jordan Hare is absolutely off the charts incredible. Neyland is right up there with any other stadium in the entire country, so that doesn't make a lick of sense to me, if I'm being totally honest. So some different issues with that. I understand that you're going to lean a little bit on the quality of the team and their record in that stadium, and I totally get that. But at the end of the day, you got to give the atmosphere. The atmosphere is what makes those places special. And I think regardless of what your record is in that stadium, regardless of all of that type of stuff, you got to take the energy that is in that stadium. And it's a really hard thing to quantify. And I fully understand that these are not lists that are easy to come by any means. I tried to make one a couple of weeks ago, and I've changed my mind about 10 different times since then. So I fully understand that this is not necessarily an exact science by any means, and a very difficult thing to kind of get an idea of. But when I see teams like Alabama and Ohio State in the top four, I question if this was more about just how good the team is rather than how good the atmosphere is. So that was the big beef that I had there. It wasn't necessarily anything too aggressive, but it's about to get a little bit more aggressive because there's a couple of these offensive rankings that are just beyond crazy. But let's jump into them real quick. And it starts with Georgia and Oregon up top. I don't necessarily have too big of an issue with that. I think those are two offenses that are going to be off the charts good. They can do just about everything you want them to do. I have a little bit of an issue with Alabama being tied with Texas. I think Texas should have their nose above Alabama. Maybe Texas at a 93, Alabama at a 91, and I think Ohio State's a touch low. I think people are a little bit overestimating how not good, I suppose, Will Howard is. So I would have them a touch higher. I understand LSU being there. Got very little problem with that. Miami being all the way up there doesn't make me super happy, if I'm being honest. I understand they did a great job in the portal, and it expects to be a really good offense, but I don't know. I feel like that's one where you could start it at, the low 80s and adjust it as they go. Because if it's going to be a good offense, then you can bring it up to the 89, to the 90. But starting it at 89 just doesn't feel super right to me. Colorado has no business being on this list. I'll be totally honest. I have no earthly idea what they were looking at to get them to an 89 for Colorado and have them on the same footing as people like Missouri and LSU. In what world? I'm sorry. This is a fun offense. They have a lot of really talented guys. Shadur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Travis Hunter is really fun. LaJohntay Wester, I think, is going to be a great player. I have seen none of that materialize into wins. I've seen none of that materialize into big-time points against teams that actually matter. So it's no disrespect to Colorado. I think they're building something out there, and I think the offense is going to be much better this year, but it's a far cry from an 89 and being one of the top offenses in the country. I can promise you that. And then the final one, Clemson being in the top 10 makes absolutely no sense. Clemson was just not a good offense a year ago, and they've done some things to get better at certain positions, particularly wide receiver, but I have no idea if all that's going to work. The way that I saw it last year was Cade Klubnik and Garrett Riley were on two totally different pages, and if that's the case going into this year, it doesn't matter who's catching passes. It doesn't matter who's running the ball. It's not going to work. So I think Clemson being in this group is just a little bit goofy to me. Ole Miss being this low, I don't necessarily love. It's a fantastic offense that was really, really good a year ago. So I don't necessarily understand how they're on the same footing as people like Utah and Penn State and Clemson. But, you know, that's the ratings that they had. Apparently they went off PFF grading, which a lot of people have a lot of opinions about. I'm a little bit split on it, to be totally honest with you. But at the end of the day, I got some issues with those rankings. And the defensive ones, frankly, the top 10 is a little bit better. I'm cool with Ohio State being number 1. That defense is absolutely ridiculous. Georgia being number 2, more than fine with that. That totally makes sense. I think Oregon, Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, all being on the same footing kind of makes sense. I think Alabama is a touch below that. I think they do have tons of ability on that defense and will be a good group, but I do worry about that back end at times. I do kind of worry about the pass rush in some different ways, so I dropped them down, maybe down to the Texas and the Penn States, but at the end of the day, I don't think this is a very bad list by any means. I think Florida State, Oklahoma, Iowa, Utah being right in that group absolutely makes sense as well. All very good defenses this upcoming year. There's a couple of beefs, though, and the biggest one, more than anything else, is Nebraska has to be in this group. They were a number 11 defense in the country a year ago, returned almost everyone from a year ago, and everyone's getting better. Nash Hutchmeyer is one of the best defensive tackles in the entire country. I think MJ Sherman's going to be a really good player. Bly Hill's going to be a really good player. So Nebraska not being on here is just insane. But outside of that, I don't have too many problems with the top 10. I have more problems down the list, though. I can promise you that. Let's start at number 16, where they have USC as a 86 overall. In what world is USC an 86 overall? In what world are they the number 16 defense in the country? They were bad a year ago, and they've gotten a new coordinator, and that's all well and good, but the personnel is still not good. It's not going to be a good defense, just plain and simple. It could be a passable defense. It could be an opportunistic defense. It's not going to be good. There's no two ways about it, and the idea that they would be number 16 in the country is insane. LSU being 84 overall and 18th on the list, insane. I don't understand what they're looking at to get all these ratings because that's a bad defense, and it's not at the point where that personnel is going to be able to save it. There's no two ways about that. And then finally, the biggest one, I'm going back to Colorado. They're number 20 on the defensive list, and that is a outright bad defense. You can cut it any way you want. That is a terrible defense, and it was the entirety of last year. They've done some really, really good things and brought in some really good players for this upcoming year. It's still a bad defense. It's still a defense that has a front line that can play really good football for the majority of the game, and then a backside that is not going to be good, and a depth that is going to be pretty terrible, to be totally honest, if I'm being honest. So I don't necessarily love these ratings too much, I'll be totally honest, but one of the things I did love were the sights and sounds that came out of this game. That's the thing that gets me so excited. You see all the traditions going through, and there's going to be so many of them. You know, you have absolutely everything you could possibly want. The Howard's Rock touching it as they go down onto Clemson Field, the ASU Sun Devil and the FSU Seminole spearing the field before the game. You have the Nittany Lion opening the gate for the Penn State Nittany Lions as they run onto the field. The Oregon Duck, the Buzz, Bevo, all of them are in the game. So there is that energy that you want in that game where it's not just about what's happening on the field. I am not going to skip any of these intros because there's just going to be so many incredible things to have. Also, special calls for every team, including Kennesaw State, the new addition to the FBS, and it is "Who Gives a Hoot, the Owls Do." I absolutely love that. That's an absolutely cool chant. They also have different chants throughout the games for different teams. They have Texas Fight, they have Go Ducks, they have an SEC chant for all of the SEC teams, which frankly is going to be hilarious to hear someone else kind of mockingly cheer that during a game. So absolutely love this. It's going to be really interesting to watch. They have whiteouts, they have blackouts, they have striped, checkered stadiums. They got everything that you could possibly want that is special about college football in this game. The one thing they don't, and they absolutely should, is horns down. For some reason, they are not including horns down in this game, and frankly, there is nothing more college football than everyone that is not a Texas fan hating Texas and doing horns down. So that's got to be in the game. If it's not this year, it's got to be next year. But they do have all the other hand signals. They do have horns up, obviously. They have the U. They have a ton of different great ones. The Wolfpack sign for NC State. So a lot of really great things. The only critique I have there is gotta have horns down in the game because it is as big of a part of college football as really anything in college football right now. So that's the only beef I have. Definitely some things that I don't necessarily love about the ratings, but those will update throughout the season and hopefully will find their level somewhere throughout the season. So it'll be fascinating to watch this kind of develop and see how these change, because I tend to hope they do, but the reality is all this tells me is we're closer to this game coming out, and that's all I care about. So very, very happy. Whether I have bad things to say, good things to say, or medium things to say, we're a day closer to this game coming out, and I think we can all be excited about that. But let's take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about my guys going into the 2024 season. I feel like these 5 guys that I'm just about to talk about are just going to be really incredible this upcoming season and help their teams in a ton of different ways. So I'll break down that right after this, so stick with us.